Hey everyone, I am back today with a book video. So I'm going to be going through all of the books I read in 2019. I ended up reading 15 books in 2019, which I think is the least amount of books I've ever read in a year since getting into reading and starting my YouTube channel. But that's okay. 2019 was a wild ride. I did so much last year, so I'm not mad about it. I did really enjoy a lot of the books that I read, and since I stopped making videos May of 2019, I thought this would be a good chance for me to go through a lot of the books that I haven't gotten a chance to talk to y'all about since I never made any videos about them. I've talked about a few of them here and there so far in my newer videos, but I thought it might be good to just do a video wrap up and quickly go through each of them. So I'm not going to get too in detail for all of these books because I don't want this video to be too long. I think I'm going to go chronologically based on the order that I read all of these books in. So the first book I read in 2019 was actually an audiobook, and it's called And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. It's a YA mystery thriller scary book, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It doesn't have the greatest reviews on Goodreads, but I really liked it. I love creepy scary books, so this book was right up my alley. The audiobook is very creepy, and I loved that about it. It had so many extra sound effects and voices that made it feel very real, and I remember actually being scared while listening to this audiobook. So fair warning, if you don't like that kind of stuff, then this probably isn't the book for you, but I really liked it. The ending took me by surprise. It's definitely more of a disturbing story. It's very dark. It does have some trigger warnings for eating disorders, anorexia, suicide, so maybe be careful going into it. Overall, it made my skin crawl, and I thought it was just a really unique story. The second book I read last year was The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. This is the second book in the Truly Devious trilogy, so I'm sure a lot of you, if not all of you, have heard of this series. I feel like it's been pretty popular within the recent years on BookTube. I loved the first book, and I couldn't wait to pick up this second one, and I did really enjoy it, but I didn't love it as much as the first book. I think I ended up giving this 4 stars. I just love the atmosphere of this series. It takes place in a boarding school in Vermont. It's another YA mystery book. And it goes back and forth between the past and the present, and there's 2 sort of mysteries going on, and it's interesting to see how the timelines and the mysteries intertwine together. I love the main character. She loves true crime podcasts and all of that kind of stuff, so I felt like I could really relate to her. I felt like the setting and the atmosphere in this series is written just so perfectly. I do have a full video on this book with spoilers, so if you need to catch up before you read the final book, The Hand on the Wall, go check out that video. I'm probably gonna have to watch it myself so that I can read The Hand on the Wall, which is the last book in the series that I hope to be reading soon. Next, I read an audiobook called An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I love this book, one of my favorite books I read last year. I gave it 5 stars. It was so good. It's again kind of a mystery book. In some parts I think it was suspenseful, but it was just more contemporary / mystery. I feel like it's good going in blind, which is what I did, but the gist of it is one day our main character, she's walking around the streets, I believe in New York City, and suddenly there's this new statue there of this metal man, I believe, and so she makes a video about it on her YouTube channel, and then overnight it blows up, and it turns out that these statues appeared all over the world, and no one can figure out who put them there, where they came from, all of that. But what I also loved about it is it was a commentary also on instant fame, because she became famous for being the first person to discover these statues or to report about it. So I loved that commentary, since she's so young, being dumped into this world of interviews and news and all of that. So that was one of my favorite parts about it. But I do have a video where I wrapped up my thoughts on 3 mystery audiobooks, and it included the first book I talked about, And the Trees Crept In, as well as this book and another book I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So I'll link that video below if you want more details on all of those books. Next, I read The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, and I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars, a really solid 4 stars. Again, loved the atmosphere in the world. This was a very popular book last year. It takes place I believe, in Paris in 1889, but it's sort of like an alternate history Paris. So there's some steampunk elements to it, some fantasy elements, magic, that kind of stuff. And there's also like a group of people that have to go find this artifact, and it's kind of like, you know, your ragtag group of people that want to complete a heist kind of thing. So I loved that element of it. I haven't read Six of Crows. It's on my to-do list for 2020, but I've heard some people compare that part of it to Six of Crows, so maybe if that's something you're interested in. But I love Roshani Chakshi's writing. I read her book, what was it called? The Star-Touched Queen, a few years ago. It's just very poetic, very flowery, but I fall in love with it, and it makes it just feel so whimsical. I really love this one. The next, I read To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. It was one of my goals of 2019 to finally read this trilogy, because I've been on booktube for so many years, hearing so many people talk about this series and not having read it. So when the movie was coming out and everything, I was like, I need to read this trilogy. I ended up giving this first book 5 stars. I'm reading my little review on Goodreads. I said this was so cute but also emotional, a great contemporary read. I still stand by that. I don't know if I fully stand by the 5-star rating, but I remember just loving the characters, loving her family. I didn't really agree with all of the decisions that she made, but I really loved the movies. I do have a whole video on my thoughts on this book and the movie, I believe. So again, I'll link below. Next, I listened to another YA mystery audiobook, The Cheerleaders, and this one's included in that wrap-up video I talked about. This book was very weird. It's by Kara Thomas. I read one of her other books called The Darkest Corners, and I really enjoyed that one. But it's basically about this girl who lives in a town where over the past, I think, 5 years, a lot of girls have gone missing or died in their town that were cheerleaders. One of them being her sister. Her sister was believed to have committed suicide, but our main character doesn't necessarily believe that and kind of sets out to uncover the truth. This book does have trigger warnings for statutory rape and abortion, so I felt like those topics were kind of thrown at you in the beginning, and I don't think they were glamorized in any way, but they are delved into a little bit. I gave this book 3 stars. It was good, but nothing to really write home about. I talk about it more in that video though. Next, I think I needed something a little bit lighter than The Cheerleaders, so I picked up P.S. I Still Love You, the second book. Again, I think I gave this book 4 stars. Didn't love it as much as the first one. Honestly, now I don't remember that much about it. I'd probably give it 3 stars now, but I still really want to watch the second movie. After that, I picked up 3 Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. One of my goals last year was to read this trilogy because so many people talk about it. I only got through the first book. I haven't continued on yet. Honestly, I don't remember a ton about this first book. I remember feeling like I wasn't really connecting to it. I ended up giving it 3 stars. The ending had a good twist and it was a cool world, but I didn't love it. So I just don't know if I'm going to pick up the next books just because I don't remember so much about this one. I'm either gonna have to reread it or read like a spoiler recap or something, which I'm open to doing, so let me know if I should continue with this series. Next, I read my favorite book of 2019, and it was Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I gave this book 5 stars. Not my first Christina Lauren book, actually. I read Sublime by Christina Lauren, which was a YA ghost kind of mystery book, and I didn't like it. It's not that I didn't read their books because I didn't like that book. I don't know, I just never tried it. I felt like at this point I'd really stopped making videos and I just wanted something fun and romancy, so I thought I would try this book and I loved it. It's about a girl named Macy and a guy named Elliot. They were boyfriend and girlfriend whenever they were young, but as they grew up they went their separate ways and continued on in their lives. Well, this book starts whenever they see each other again and kind of reconnect, and it goes back and forth between the past and the present, the relationship in the past and what was going on in each of their lives at that time, and kind of what they meant to each other at that young age, and then the present of if they can rekindle that flame and kind of heal from some of the things that has happened to them in their lives. And I just really connected with these characters and this story. I don't think I've read many books like this, but I just really connected to the young love portion of it, that they started dating at such a young age, and see how that kind of affected them as they got older, because I've been with my husband since I was 15, so I just really connect to stories like that, I guess. But yeah, I just totally fell in love with their story. I stayed up late reading this book, couldn't put it down, and I laughed and I cried, and I just thought it was so emotional and so good. So I wanted to finish up the trilogy, so I read Always and Forever, Lara or Laura Jean. I still don't know how you say it. I feel like in the book she says to pronounce it differently than they pronounce it in the movie. But I ended up giving this book 5 stars. Looking back, I don't know if this was really a 5-star read. It was kind of slow at some points. I did feel really emotionally connected to it when I was reading it, but now looking back at this point, that's kind of fizzled out. I'll definitely watch the movies, and I'll definitely say this is a fun trilogy to read if you want some YA contemporary, but I don't know if I still think it's a 5-star series. I would say I'd probably end up giving it as a whole like 3.5 stars. Alright, and I listened to another audiobook after that. It was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren, because I wanted to try more Christina Lauren books, and I gave this one 4 stars. It was a really fun time. I enjoyed Josh and Hazel. This is more of like a lighthearted and funny read. There's like some awkwardness going on. She was in love with him a long time ago when he was her teacher in college, or TA, and then nothing ever happened, and it's like years later and they end up seeing each other again, and it's really cute and funny, but also not super memorable. It didn't hit me nearly as hard as Love in Other Words. So then I had to pick up The Unhoneymooners because I felt like everyone was talking about this book last year, and again I gave it 4 stars. Again, another fun time. I think I liked this one more than Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, but still not as much as Love in Other Words. Main character, her sister got married, and at the wedding everyone got food poisoning. The bride and groom couldn't go on their honeymoon, but they didn't want it to be wasted, so they gave it to the bride's sister and the groom's brother, I'm pretty sure. So they go together on the honeymoon, but they bicker and don't like each other, so it's kind of a hate to love, forced proximity kind of trope. I felt like I got annoyed at some parts with like the miscommunication, characters not really expressing their feelings, but overall it was good. Next, I listened to Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, a nonfiction book kind of about her life and her training and acting and all of that, and comedy. I thought it was funny and good. I ended up not really giving it a rating because I didn't really know how to rate it. I would probably give it like 3 stars, 3.5 stars. It was solid. It was good. After that, I listened to the audiobook Again But Better by Christine Riccio. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I thought it was so cute and fun, and I really connected to the main character and her challenges with going to college and just life struggles. I felt like there were so many themes in this book that 20-something-year-olds can identify with. I loved sort of the twist that she put on the story. I really enjoyed the romance. Yeah, I thought it was a super good time. I felt like at some points it kind of dragged out as far as the pacing goes, but really good overall, and I sort of got very emotional towards the end, kind of because Christine wrote this book, but also with the story. So there was also like an emotional nostalgia part to it, especially I think it's at the end where Christine comes on and talks about how much this book meant to her as far as like booktube and reading and all that, and it just it was so sweet. And then the last book I read in 2019 was Strange and Ever After by Susan Dennard. I don't know why I picked it up. It's the last book in the Something Strange and Deadly trilogy, and I think I just saw it on my shelf and was like, I need to finish that trilogy. I started it years ago. I feel like it was one of my first reviews on my channel. This is like a historical fantasy steampunk story with zombies and necromancy. So I always thought it was super cool because of the fantastical elements. I enjoy the characters, their relationships, the romance. There's a lot of this story that I do really enjoy, but this last book, I don't know, take it or leave it. For me, it was 3 stars. Probably most of it was because it had been so long since I read the first 2 books, so I was very disconnected and removed from the story. Still a good time and entertaining, but I wasn't nearly as connected to it as I was the first 2 books. But maybe if I'd read all of them back to back, that would be different. I don't know. I don't think it's a bad series by any means. Still to me kind of felt like reading 2014 YA. I don't know when this was published. Yeah, this was published in 2014. So I think it still reads like that and didn't necessarily stand up against the test of time, but I don't think it was bad. The story in this series is nostalgic to me because it kind of opened my eyes to historical, steampunky kind of stuff, so it has a special place in my heart because of that, and I'm glad to say that I finished it, and it's another trilogy I can say I've completed and not hanging over my head unfinished. But I think I made a new rule for myself in 2020 that if I'm holding on to any series that are, you know, from the 2013, 14, 15 era that I have cannot finish. If I am going to finish them, I'm going to reread the first, second books, however, so that I can give the next book a fair chance, and the rest of the story will be fresh in my mind and my feels, so that I'll be more likely to enjoy the last book and kind of give the last book the best chance. And if I look at a series that's unfinished and I just think I really don't want to reread those first books, then I need to just get rid of it, because there's no point in trying to read the last book when it's been like 5 or 6 years since I read the first books, you know? It's just kind of hard for me to let go of some of those series. Yeah, that's my rule this year. If I start a new series this year, I must continue on with the sequels pretty soon after to keep up with it, so that I don't end up with so many unfinished series. And then if I decide I want to keep a series that I haven't finished, I must reread the books beforehand and want to reread them in order to keep it. So those are all of the books I read in 2019. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you read any of these, and also what was your favorite book you read in 2019, because I definitely need to catch up on all of the great books from last year. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see y'all soon. Bye.